So I'm an engineer. Let's start off with that. Thank you, by the way, for all being here. Excellency, thank you for taking the time to talk with me here on stage. I grew up in a time where there were no computers. So yeah, I look a bit older than me, probably everybody else in the room here today. I also grew up in a time where there was mandatory military service. That was my first exposure to technology. I was in the Navy, submarines, things like that. Decided to go into healthcare. I have 10 years of research in cancer research, radiology, radiotherapy, things like that. And started to realize that with the introduction of technology, I could actually have way more impact by going into computer science than actually staying in healthcare, where really I saw that technology was driving the way that healthcare was changing. Already, this is mid-80s or mid-90s. Went back to school, studied computer science, turned out to have a gift for it. Became a researcher for a number of years in Portugal, taught for 10 years at Cornell, did lots of consulting on the side for big companies and things like that in those days, distributed systems. At some moment, Amazon asked me to come give a talk. And I think, like, really? Amazon? It's a bookshop. You know, how hard can it be? Web server and a database. Yeah? I did go, fortunately. One glimpse in that kitchen, and I started to realize that Amazon is not a retailer, it's a technology company. A technology company operating at a level that was 10 years ahead of everybody else. You couldn't buy technology that actually serves it. You had to make it. And that was a major sort of boon for me that a few days later, if Jeff called, like, do you want to come work for us? I didn't have to think that terribly long. But if you then look at Amazon, and especially in the context of where we're talking about today with respect to AI and things like that, Amazon has been on the forefront of that, even though as a consumer, you wouldn't know that. Who here has never been an Amazon customer? Can I talk to you later? Anyway, you've all been using AI for the past 25 years. Recommendations, similarities, customers who bought X bought Y. You know, we sit on billions and billions of orders. And the number of orders a minute is not where you can have humans look at, sort of figuring out, is this a fraudulent order or not? Or products are being sold on our site, is this counterfeit or not? All of those are processes that have been automated with AI. Not the AI that we talk about today, but the AI that works really well. Now, there's a great quote by John McCarthy, who is one of the founders of modern day artificial intelligence. And he said that as soon as it works, nobody calls it AI anymore. Yeah? I don't know whether you can turn that around. If it doesn't work, we call it AI. But, you know, anyway, that's sort of my history in building. And I've been using AI for really practical applications. You think about Alexa, you think about drones, you think about the 10,000 robots running around in each of our fulfillment centers. They can't be in each other's way. They all have different tasks. They all need to be autonomous. All of that is AI, and it works really well.
So this session is titled The Future of Tech. Very broad title, right? You have brought up now about if it works, we don't call it AI. I hope that it is working, because there's a lot of people calling it AI right now. But over the space of the last few years, you've seen this sort of evolution in the narrative of what is the next big, I would say, our generation's industrial revolution, if I may, right? Yeah. It was blockchain a couple of years ago. It's now AI. It's now Gen AI. And we're seeing this evolution in the narrative. How do you see AI's trajectory over the next few years? And is it as meaningful as the way that it's being positioned today on a global level?
Well, as with any technology, you know, and if you've been in technology for long enough, you've seen these cycles coming by, yeah, where the excitement of something like, oh, yeah, this is it, yeah. And by the way, that goes all the way back to, if I think about AI, probably goes all the way back to actually Plato. 3,000 years ago, Plato was one of the first ones to talk about whether machines could actually take human tasks. And he goes as far, if you ever read The Republic by Plato, he describes a city-state where robots are actually doing human jobs. This is 3,000 years ago. But Plato and others all were thinking that the brain was actually something that had symbolics in it, and as such you could emulate that if you had machines. It took 3,000 years before computers came along who actually manipulate symbols. Yeah, and as such, start thinking like Turing, yeah, with his famous paper, Can Machines Think, in the 50s, was actually really truly the first steps of using modern technology. McCarthy, Minsky, others in the 50s, starting defining the word artificial intelligence, but still from the brain down. And then actually what the big revolution, a really big kick was for all of artificial intelligence is what is called embodied AI. Instead of going top down, what if we take each and every one of the senses that humans have, can we emulate them using computers? Vision, voice, touch, all these kind of things. And we can start making robots with them or machinery that can use these tasks. Now, that has been working since the 80s, basically 90s, and works really well, yeah, because we spend a lot of time on that. The same is now for all of that was driven by first machine learning, then reinforcement learning, and large. Every time a technology step, we can do more, we improve hardware, software, and now we have an ability to have very large distributed training to build these large language models. I think we'll be spending, next to figuring out exactly what are the areas that we can really truly apply this to, we'll be spending actually most of our efforts on other things like democratization, making sure it's not that not all of these LLMs are purely American and Western Europe based. And what I really mean by that, they're not culturally sensitive to how the rest of the world is. I mean, we have, 190 countries these days, but probably a multiple of that different cultures within each of those countries. It's not about just translating. It is the core body of knowledge, of cultural knowledge, that I think will be important. So if I think about evolving the current state of AI, it is really being sensitive to a worldwide audience and making sure that we can democratize it in such a way that everybody in the world can actually benefit from that.
What we should have learned from other technology adoption cycles is that those who make the biggest investments in R&D, in general, also the ones that benefit from it. And unless we take deliberate action to make sure that democratization happens, I'm pretty sure that South America, Africa, some parts of Southeast Asia, for example, do not have the funds to make these investments themselves. So it is up to us. If we want to have a global economy that is healthy, not just one or two Western countries or others that can make these similar type of investments, we need to make sure that we democratize this over the whole world. And in context of that, if you look at, take the United Nations Sustainability Goals from a number of years ago. Yeah? We expect that the world will be growing by 2 billion people between now and 2050. How do we make sure they have food? How can we make sure they have secure water, clean water supplies? How can we make sure health and poverty are done? I think technology plays a major role in all of those, and AI will play a role. Actually, AI plays a role right now in solving many of those. If you look at the company like, and I'm particularly interested always in young businesses, because most of what I've seen in young businesses is different from many others. If you look at the US in startups, they all want to be the next unicorn. They want to have 1 billion users and things like that. If I look at young businesses, let's say Southeast Asia, India, Gulf, South America, Global South, as we call it, most of those startups are actually looking at solving really, really hard problems, human problems. Mostly because maybe they have a background themselves. If you look at a company like Hara in Jakarta, all smallholder farmers in Southeast Asia or in India, in Indonesia, have no identity. Means they can't get a loan, means that you have to go to a loan shark in the village and pay about 50 to 60% interest for the seeds they buy for the next crop. So what Howard does is, they give them an identity, measure their plot of land, measure their yield, put all of that in a data processing engine, and suddenly banks and other companies are keen on giving these loans because there's a 100% repay rate. If you think about delivering vaccines in the outskirts in Africa, you can't drive there. So you need to use drones. Drones are nothing but AI. You know, a drone, there's no pilot. You tell them to go there, and it needs to figure out. It can't fly into other drones, can't fly into birds. It cannot land on washing lines. It's all of these things are all AI that works really well. And as such, many of these young businesses are all using artificial intelligence already to solve really hard problems, whether it is in healthcare or in food supply. A lot of that is determined, actually, whether there are public open data sets available that allow these companies to do this. If you think about an organization like Digital Africa, which basically has all of the satellite data from the past 10 years from Africa, and you can see how illegal roads are being built towards illegal mining. But you can't do this by a human sitting in front of that and going through Angola and trying to find those roads. No, you need to actually have automated processing, which is AI again, because it's image recognition. So I believe that the future of AI will still be continuing down this path. We need to ensure that we actually promote these companies and make sure that they can be alive, because they are solving the hardest problems in the world. And we should make sure they all have the AI tools that they need. And in that sense, actually coming back to the Gulf here, the Technology Innovation Institute here in the Gulf has actually built one of the best performant open source large language models. Falcon is a 180 billion parameter model built on one of the biggest data sets available in the world, and it's open, available for everyone to use. At Amazon, or at AWS, the cloud computing division of Amazon, actually is in this business of democratizing. We don't have one model, we have a few models ourselves, but we have a platform called Bedrock and SageMaker, for which where everybody can make their models available. So Falcon is available on AWS for everybody in the world to use as an open source environment.
So Amazon is no stranger to the region, right? I mean, you made big impacts and inroads. It was one of the big success stories, you know, buying Souk.com when Amazon came in, AWS building a lot of their infrastructure across the region, especially now in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And it's been a very sort of cohesive relationship, I have to say. And you said earlier you've already been using AI. So why the focus on Gen AI? And how substantial will that change and shift to be from AI today that we're currently using?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we have this current focus on AI is that we suddenly saw a radical change in the technology adoption cycle. If you think about a number of years, if you think about, let's say, in terms of technology, we're all using spreadsheets today. Now, the first spreadsheet was developed in the 60s called VisiCalc. Took 10 to 15 years before a first commercial product came out, which Lotus 123, Excel. These days there's probably only one winner in that space. But it took years. And this technology cycle, the famous book about crossing the chasm, you know, you get your early adopters, you have to then motivate the early majority to actually do this. And this is because most of these technologies were delivered to businesses first, before the general public. What's happened with Gen AI is a radical different thing. We didn't sort of immediately release it to businesses, get the early users, start to educate the larger public before we would release it to them. No, we release it to the general public without educating them. That has happened. And as such, suddenly, you get this knee-jerk reaction. On one hand, the general public goes like, wow, what's this? Yeah, this is amazing. I still believe, by the way, we're amazed. It's a bit like a dancing bear. Yeah? We're amazed that this bear can dance. We don't look whether it dances well or not. No, we're still amazed by it. And so that's sort of what the general public, and then regulators and governments who have not been educated on this get these knee-jerk reactions. And knee-jerk reactions in general means protectionism. Yeah, until they actually start realizing what the impact of this technology can be. It is mostly because, you know, we're still speculating what the impact is going to be. But if this is just like any other hype cycle, which I think it is, we'll see a number of years where, you know, this is on forefront of everybody's mind, and then it becomes practical. And then probably we won't call it AI anymore. Yeah. Do I think it will have significant impact? Yes, because suddenly, that's also something that yesterday was said on the main stage. In the past, programmers, engineers would need to be able to program. They need to be able to manipulate this and then hand it over as an app to someone else. Now the programming interface is natural text. Suddenly, everybody can interact with these systems. And that's a radical shift. We already saw this happening with our voice assistants when, again, Alexa, believe me, Alexa is nothing but AI. It's, that machine that's on your desk does nothing. It just records your voice, sends it over.
Chatham House rules you can't. Anybody
Alexa,
that,
natural language processing. It takes your voice. So in case you don't know, this is devices that have the Alexa platform built in, which takes your text, does natural language processing on that, does basically speech to text, then does find the intent in the text, in the sentiment, find out what they want, get a result of that, speak it back. All of that is AI. So voice, for example, is extremely important. There is a research institution just outside Manila in the Philippines called the International Rice Research Institute. Remember that for 70% of the population in the world, rice is their main staple of food. That means security there is extremely important. So IRI has as a goal to sort of eliminate poverty for those who are actually depending on rice. They have 200,000 strands of DNA of rice in the freezer. One of the systems, and so they make a use of AI for that for a long time because they get all these seeds, and if for humans to evaluate the seeds is a laborious task. Can you do this with computer vision? Suddenly there's no backlog anymore to get it into their freezers. But they also built this system where most farmers in poor countries that actually are the rice farmers they don't read and write. Yeah? They type on their cell phones. They don't have cell phones. But there's a phone in the village. So they can dial into this number and explain in their local text what a piece of land is, what a plot of land is. And then the system will advise them how much fertilizer to use. Because they've never been trained of that. It means that they buy a lot of fertilizer, throw it on the land, lots of runoff into rivers, pollution, things like that. So here, by using AI, voice to text, text to voice, translation in between to different dialects, suddenly you open up a digital world to people who do not have a digital access, which is just using our voice. Now, those systems really work well. And thinking about how can we solve the biggest problems in this world with technology, and AI is just one of the tools in that, not the only tool.
So I do want to ask you that one of the fears that a lot of people have, and so I'm in venture capital, and I've spoken to at least 20,000 companies over the last 5 years. We use AI to kind of sift through. And we've invested in 60 or so companies that we believe is true AI being developed with a global application from the region, right? Now, a lot of the narrative that we hear at times is that AI was a fantastic aid to humanity, and Gen AI is going to be a replacement for humanity and human workers. That's why they're trying to make it sound like a person, engage like a person, and act like a person. Where do you see that? Is that fear unfounded to a certain extent, or will it be like previous technology cycles?
Well, if you're an optimist, then you should believe that it will come for good. Yeah? Do I think particular jobs will disappear? Yesterday there was a gentleman here that spoke about sort of, was it Arthur Little, the consulting company, who mentioned that when his employees asked him what's going to change, he says, yeah, probably all the analyst jobs will disappear. And that was within his own company. But you'll all be doing other things. Yeah? There's something called Jeffson's paradox, which comes out of economics, which basically says that if you make things more efficient, we don't stick with just doing that one efficient thing. We suddenly start to do much more of it. Yeah? When I talked about spreadsheets, you have to think about JP Morgan had a whole floor of humans behind calculators. They were basically a human spreadsheet. They didn't all become unemployed. They just went to do different things. They were upskilled into other jobs within the company. Do I think that a lot of, let's say, especially white-collar jobs will change dramatically? Yeah, probably. But you'll be upskilled to others. And this is a historical thing. Printing press, we got saw that example. Massive, suddenly all these copiers got out of business. Or you probably all have refrigerators. Do you know that the refrigerator killed the ice business? Before that, the only way to keep your veggies fresh was on ice. Yeah? Everybody that was in the ice business suddenly got out of business. Yeah? However, everybody went into areas that suddenly you could keep food and drinks and cheese and all these things, you could keep them fresh. That was a whole boom. And you see, the same goes for the steam engine and all these kind of things. They took away jobs, but everybody, not everybody suddenly disappeared from the earth. No, we all got different jobs. We all went to do different things. And as such, I have a great trust in that this will just be the next thing. It is just that we've been spoiled with Arnold Schwarzenegger and many of these other science fiction movies that actually paint a really bleak future. It's up to us. Remember, AI predicts. We as humans decide. It is a tool that helps us. Yeah? We'll be forever superior in our intelligence, unless you consider factual knowledge to be intelligence. That's not. It's putting things together. It's having a heart, it's having emotion, it's having focus on things that are important, not just economic benefits. Are all of your people actually economically benefiting, not just the pure rich ones? And that's not just for the Gulf or anywhere, that's worldwide. And I strongly believe that technology will be the tool there. If you look at, let me give you one more really important example. One of a really big problem that we don't talk that much about because it's sort of in the edge. But if you think about human trafficking and sexual exploitation of children, yeah, what are we doing about that? So there's an organization called FORN. And what FORN does is actually tries to battle this problem using AI. They have a massive database of images of all missing children, and that's continuously up-to-dated. They compare it against, for example, the 10,000 ads that are created new every day in the US of escorts. They have by now, I think 18,000 kids have been saved because of that program, Spotlight. They have a tool called Saver that each of you, if you run an online platform, that you can use to identify sexually exploitive children material on your platform and immediately erase it. They also have a tool that, if you have an online platform where children are active, that exactly know how these grooming patterns happen between these attackers and these children. And all of those tools are AI tools. Yeah? And remember, it's us humans that use these tools for good. Can we use them for bad? Sure, we're humans. There's bad humans in that sense.
And I think this is why when the UAE went and pursued its mission on developing AI, making this a center of AI, the tagline was AI for good, right? So in the last couple minutes that we have with you, Dr. Werner, I would love to get, and I've listened to some of your previous predictions. It would be good to get your predictions for 2024 and maybe slightly beyond.
Yeah, so 2024, of course, there's this thing about AI, but my first prediction there was that we want to, or need to move, we will, to cultural aware AI. Meaning that, I gave an example, if you have there's a famous South American author called Isabel Allende. I think she's either the daughter or the niece of the president of Chile that disappeared because of the CIA and others that didn't like that. She writes these very famous books. If you would use a Western LLM to actually review that book, you would get a very different answer from a South American one. And the same goes for anything else. Yeah, any other thing that has a slightly cultural implication. So that's one. We need to get to that. There's technology we get. We need to basically have LLMs sort of communicate with each other, saying like, I would give this answer, the other will say, well, give this answer, let's agree on that. Have smaller agents that are very unique. Second one, in terms of AI, is how development will change. Until now, AI in development has mostly been around sort of replacing cut and paste. Yeah. What developers often do, they go onto a site called Stack Overflow, post a question, lots of people upvote an answer, you copy that, put it in your program. That's sort of what AI already did for a while for us. But now, and I think that's something what we really want to do at Amazon, and what we're doing is not only use these base models, but train it with your unique code, or train it with your unique business data, so it's that you get an LLM that's not just a generic LLM, it just has this language interface to your data. And it's private, it's your data. We need to ensure privacy, security, guardrails around that. And the same goes in development. Instead of just having cut and paste, I don't know if you know, when a developer comes on board in a company, it might take a year before he actually really integrates well into your code base. Something like the Amazon Storage Service has millions of lines of code. And so it can help you understand this. You know, the senior developer no longer needs to sit next to you and explain you what you're doing. It can explain these things for you. There's two other things. Education will change radically. I think no longer this 4-year education cycles that we have in terms of universities can keep up with the pace of technology. So it is up to private sector and governments to actually make sure that on-the-job training is actually really where most of the efforts are going to be put into. You know, yes, 4-year university degree is still going to be important, really, because I think you know, it makes you think differently. But really, on-the-job training will become radically more important than the 4-year education. And the last thing has nothing to do with AI, is that one of the things I think in society is changing is the taboo about talking about women's healthcare. So femtech is one of those areas where often women-led companies are making radical changes in really addressing things around menstruation, around PMS, but mostly important, for example, about menopause. Every woman will go through menopause, yet we don't talk about that. Yeah? But using technology to actually help these women get through those phases are going to be crucial. And given that the societal taboo is actually changing on that, we now see a massive reinforcement of investment in companies that are attacking women's health. Remember the last World Cup, 30 players, Women's World Cup, 30 women's players got career-ending injuries on their knees. Why? Because they train like men. Many of these things we've done because it's a male-dominated world in that sense. We need to make sure that it becomes an equal-dominated world.
Thank you, Dr. Werner, Your Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to us, and have a great rest of the day.
Okay, thank you.